So stuck in traffic, we got to get going anyway. So last week, I believe we started with Pran Mudra. Right. So one of the things I'm going to go over quickly before we begin the presentation is how I put the manual together and what that might help you in terms of guidelines for future study. All right. Anyway, hand mudras, right? So Pran Mudra was last week. Right. That's thumb to, right? And now this week it's Apan Mudra. A-P-A-N, Apan Mudra. Everybody say that? Apan Mudra. So your thumb is touching your middle and your ring, and your index. So again, you see I'm wearing my ACD shirt, so you can't tell if I'm down with the hard rock, or, the horns of the bull, or I love you, or whatever. Anyway, Apan Mudra. Apan Mudra, okay. So that's going to channel the eliminative force a little bit. All right, so that's our hand position for tonight. All right, so close your eyes, and we begin every class with a little centering. Notice the impact on body, breath, brain, and mind. So that means, what's the musculoskeletal feeling? What do you have to do to hold this pose? How does it affect your skin and your bones? What's the respiratory demand? However slight it is, you breathe differently in every position and gesture that you put yourself in. And then you're always distinguishing, we call the brain from the mind, as the sensory input from the thinking apparatus. The sensory input means the direct impression of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, whether it's something from the external environment impinging upon the senses from without, or proprioceptively inside yourself. But then the pure experience is very different than the mental categorization, analysis, however you want to define talking, subvocal. Right? Thinking is subvocal talking to yourself, right? So notice whatever you say to yourself about any of the sight, sounds, touch, taste, and smell. So 1 minute like that, just start getting centered there and begin now. Now, the meditative focus for tonight, a way of concentrating your mind, is using your breath rhythm to open up the two top chakras. So the inhale is going to enter into your forehead like you're feeding your intuition, but also this is the point of jyoti, or light, that's suggested in the Yoga Sutras as one of the 4 ways of becoming into samadhi. Focus on light in the middle of your forehead. So breathe into that space like you're energizing it, or expanding it, or activating it. But on the exhale, send it out through the crown of your head, into the planes above form. You could say the transcendent, or whatever is beyond one's self. And that's the idea behind all of yoga, to connect Atman to Brahman, that the light within yourself is not really your own. It's actually the divine light. So inhale through the forehead, exhale through the crown of your head. For the next minute, do that and begin now. And now, as a small review about your own path in yoga, your journaling question for tonight is, how did you get involved in yoga? And was it directly involved with the Kriya temple, or Was there a more circuitous route that you took? You got connected to somebody else and eventually got it. Everybody has an amazing story about how yoga comes into their life. And of course, usually the gratefulness that is connected to the fact that my life is so much better now that yoga is in my life compared to where it was before, even if it wasn't a shithole before. Just had to say that in case anybody's paying attention to the news. It could be. I mean, yogis are supposed to not be political, but it's hard not to know that, right? All right, so even if your life was good before, just review a little bit the amazing journey to get you to yoga and especially to the Kriya temple. And 1 minute now, begin. All right, gently bring your palms together in the center of your chest into Namaste. If you have the invocation, you can look in your own sheet, but if not, we'll follow the bouncing ball up here. We'll chant Om 3 times together as a group. Then I'll call off each line and repeat it with you. And hopefully the way I've set up the words makes you get the kind of rhythm or the sing-song way that after you get it becomes so clear how to add this oral transmission to you while you align yourself with the ancestors. All right, so 3 times Om, and then line by line, I'll call it off and you'll repeat it with me. Gently breathe in. Yogena chitasya padena vacham malam sharirasya chavaidya yopakarotam Pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalir anatosmi abahu purushakaram shanka chakrasidarinam Patanjalim. Harihi Om. Close your eyes, bow your head, salute the essence of yoga within yourself. Keeping the eyes closed, bring your head up on your spine, relax your palms face up in your lap, and gently open your eyes. Well, I am glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too. Never take it for granted. Just seeing one of our very close friends and teachers had a pulmonary embolism, was like hospitalized. It just reminds you again and again, in a blink of an eye, like a thief in the night. So I hope that you're happy that you're here and have another opportunity to share the gift of yoga. I'm thrilled with that. So thanks a lot for coming and showing up for this. So I just want to go over a little bit with the manual so you got an idea of what I was trying to do with this. Hi, we were kind of waiting for you. Chant the mantra inside yourself. So if you don't have your manual with you, it's fine. Somebody next to you can share it with you. See what's going. So obviously we have the title page to commemorate this Temple of Kriya Yoga. Woohoo! There's my So the first thing you open it up, and the first thing you get, of course, is the realization that we're connecting to the lineage. This is called parampara. That's where the linking comes from the previous generation or whoever was the person who turned you on to this to now, like we say, the unlit candle gets lit by a lit candle, now go thou and do likewise. So, when we're one of the tribes of the future, I never say we're the only tribe of the future, because if you think you're the only tribe of the future, you're continuing to duplicate the malignant tribalism. That's one of the worst aspects of fundamentalism in any culture. Nonetheless, so we're one of the tribes of the future, and as that, we were going to acknowledge what's been bequeathed to us before. And I never tell anybody else that you should have a lineage. I'm just saying that I'm lucky enough to connect to the fact that I understood what lineage was important. And you don't only have one lineage. It isn't just a yoga lineage that you're connected to, remember? You're always going to think, personal, familial, social, cultural, historical, political. There's a lot of different affiliations that you can have. And once you understand that rarely are two people in the same family born under the same roof, you start to really have to open up your whole idea of who is your family. So I always like to honor my lineage because that's one of the things I've learned. And again, almost all yogas chant Om, the most universal of all the mantras. So already, even if you don't have a specific lineage, like I'm Shivananda, or Yogananda, you're connected to all the yogis, right? Sometimes we say, we invite the wisdom of all ages into the room. That doesn't limit us to the yogis, right? Yeah. It's the history of humanity. Right. Now, I also like to make sure that we tell stories or poems. Now, first, I think the colloquy of breath, that's in there. I didn't tell it, right? I just gave it to you, right? But I did prepare something for you tonight because I'm always interested in those of you who don't know about tradition. Did we tell it, the vital breath last week? No, I don't think so. All right, so this is from the Prashna Upanishad. Prashna Upanishad. The importance of vital energy. Once upon a time, looking everywhere, traveling far and wide, are 6 seekers of truth and wisdom. After many miles and long journeys, they hear of a great sage who may be able to help them in their quest. They arrive at a hermitage deep in the forest. The sage asks them to spend a year with him and then ask whatever questions they wish. Right there. It should tell you something. Okay. After 1 year, one of them asks the sage, which sense is of the greatest importance in sustaining the body? In reply, the sage tells them this story. Once upon a time, there were 5 senses: hearing, sight, smell, touch, and taste. One day as they were sitting around, they talked about all the things they could do. The senses were somewhat boastful about their abilities and the importance they claimed to be the rulers of the body. Look at us, for we are remarkably special, they claimed. There's no way the body survives without us. Each sense, in turn, showed off its abilities. Hearing filled the space with music that breathed emotion and passion that stirred the soul. Sight matched the music with breathtaking splendor, swirling magical forms in exquisite shades and colors. Smell, in a puff of breath, perfumed the expanse with heavenly aromas. Taste, not to be outdone, exhaled out a cornucopia of mouth-watering flavors. Touch made the whole body vibrant with each and every breath, tingling with soft warmth and delicious coolness. They all lavished praise for one another. It was quite a show. Prana quietly breathed in and out, watching this awesome spectacle. It was simply there, present, With the in-breath, it observed the senses. With the out-breath, it observed the senses. After letting the senses go for a while, prana said, none of you reign supreme in the body. No one was listening. The senses had no time or awareness of anything else. They were completely blind to everything beyond themselves and certainly had no sight of prana. Prana tried again. The senses in their total self-absorption had no attention to spare for prana. Angered, prana left. As prana left, the sounds, colors, fragrances, tastes, physical sensations, and the mind all faded and disappeared. The senses ceased to exist. The senses had no idea what happened. As prana returned, they found themselves and knew that they were. Prana left and the senses were no longer there. The senses were suddenly vulnerable and scared. Prana reappeared and suddenly they were aware of prana. Like a light switch, they were turned on and off by this vital energy over which they had no control. But the energy had total control over them. With the awareness came the instant realization that they existed because of prana. And this vital energy was far more powerful than them. They did not rule the body at all in any way. Prana did. As they bowed down in respect, prana told them, dividing myself 5 times and spreading out in the body, I change my form and create the senses from myself, and thus give life in the body. Prashna Upanishad. So I'm just saying, long ago, they had a real respect for what really kept you alive. And a lot of the Yoga Sutras talks about distraction of your senses. This is what pratyahara is. How do you pull back to find out what is really the source of your own existence? Remember, the third Yoga Sutra, right? It's the identification of the seer with the seen that causes suffering. When consciousness identifies itself with what is not really itself. So, vital link is the breath, trying to understand the breath. So I want to make sure that every week I give you a story about breaths and stuff like that. Hints and cautions is on the next page. I wanted to, you have to find out that there are certain things that either make it more difficult for you to understand what you're trying to do or are inhibiting influences. You shouldn't have that, right? Don't eat a lot of food before you do yoga. Or don't do it when you're in a super emotional stress state, right? Or don't do a kick-ass yoga practice and then do pranayama. Do restorative poses first. And whatever. So this is just an example from the guru, right, to tell you, but almost every book has a little thing on hints and cautions. Like, don't do it with like smoky, right? A lot of insects. Just common sense things, but they lay out some guidelines. You have to eventually create the ethics yourself to what works for you in terms of setting it up where the likelihood of having a more successful experience will be greater than if you don't do this. Okay. Again, one of the reasons why they say you're supposed to practice Brahma Muhurta in the early morning hours, anywhere from 78 minutes before the sun comes up, which will change the time of year. In the winter, that's going to be 4:30 in the morning. In the summer, it'll be, in the winter it'll be like 6:30 in the morning, 7 o'clock. In the summer, it'll be 4:30, 5 o'clock. So it isn't just a fixed thing. It's tuning to that. Why? Because the quietness of the society. Remember, they're thinking this thousands of years ago, and they didn't even have all the distractions, but still they recognized it. The quietness of society is in a low ebb. So again, that attunes you to a certain receptivity. So that's a hint and a caution. You want your practice? Not can it be done with the jackhammers all around you? Of course. If you're a yogi who lives in the city, you have to put up with a certain amount of noise, right? But then you can listen to Thich Nhat Hanh saying, where's the better place to do meditation in the middle of a battlefield? So you got to get over that whole idea that it has to be totally silent and peaceful. No, the noise is always there, and you have to learn to incorporate that as one of the sense functions, but not be distracted and pull it outside yourself. So keep looking for things that say hints and cautions. Then I made sure we had a thing on the conditions for calm, but one of my guru brothers, Roger Cole, great idea about how to set up your shavasana so you get the most out of going inside yourself. And every week we'll have a different kind of shavasana induction and a different way of setting up shavasana to give you varieties. Then the next thing I did is I had the thing on props. Why props are important. You can read Mr. Hangar's words. I've tried to include enough stuff by the Iyengar tradition so you understand where I'm coming from. But, they're not just a crutch, for people who can't do the pose. They have some decided benefits that help sharpen and deepen your understanding of that. And I hope every week we'll use props in a different way that will motivate you to want to get your own props together. Then I have this article by Dr. Krishna Raman, a cardiologist that I met from India, as one example of using medical science to remind you these are the benefits of yoga. Nothing that yoga does contradicts medicine or biology or chemistry. It just goes further than that. But it's nice to hear something from a doctor who is a yogi. So the person is like, already bridging the allopathic world to you could say the complementary medicine, to the alternative medicine, whatever. So I just include an article here because it gives you and this is something for us to learn for tonight. When you want to really tune to your breathing, to the prana, you have to realize the disorders in the muscles, tightness in the muscles, right? And the muscles tight means the bones will be pulled out of place because if they move, they locomote the bones. Nervous system tension. Right. First Yoga Sutra, chapter 31 and 34, talk about trembling in the body and how it afflicts the breath and distracts the mind when your breath is low. Think of how you breathe when you're anxious and stuff like that. People are walking around like a low level of anxiety all the time. It's like having yellow alert in your inner home security system on all the time, ready to go to DEFCON 2 at any moment, right? So that's a physiological state of arousal that has you on edge all the time. How do you cool that out? So you realize, my breath, my nervous system is like this. So it's not just my muscles that have to stretch, I have to relax my nerves. Breath does that really. And then of course the disorder itself of the heart rhythm, arrhythmia in the heart. So I gave an article here, and then the last thing, it has the effects of the different poses on your constitution. And of course, how does that affect both the arrhythmia in the heart, the muscle disorder, and the nervous system? Okay, disorders of circulation. I love that. And then I gave you a couple of printouts on different sitting positions. Not everybody can sit on the floor in lotus or anything, so I gave you a couple of different variations. I really want to spend a lot of time with that. We'll try to do some of these every single week. Really important to find the right asana, the right seat for yourself, right? And even if it's sitting up in a chair, there's no excuse not to do it. Probably better if you can do it sitting up either in a chair or in your own body on the floor as opposed to lying down, only because lying down tends to have a little bit more of a tamasic quality, a dulling or heavy quality to it. And as soon as you're standing, it's too rajasic. Sitting is the balance between, there's some up energy necessary, but I'm also grounded. So there's some gravitational solidity, but at the same time I'm lifted up. Whereas I'm lying down all the time, the gravity is working too much. Standing up, too active. So sitting is supposed to be the balance between the two. Then I gave you like a little picture of Mr. Iyengar's paired nails for Vishnu Mudra, which is the way in our particular technique we want you to channel the prana. We'll start to do more digital in weeks 3 and 4, tonight, but also in weeks 3 and 4. Then the flip side of that was, again, this view from the side and the back. You got to see your sitting posture as a 3-dimensional sculpture, not just something that from the front you're trying to get a sense of, right? So you look and see his Tadasana alignment. That's one of the things I teach, right? It's always about seeing Tadasana in the pose. So you look from the side, you can see the perfect alignment that way. You look from the back, you see the perfect plumb line in the middle of the body. Also, by the way, he has that langot on, guys. That little men's G-string, the floss up the butt thing, whatever those Indians did. Supposedly pulls the Mula Bandha up there, right? Is there anybody here who wants to raise their hand and says they've had any experience with a langot? Okay, I can see. I'm not preaching to the choir here. It is a very weird sensation. But if you go to, langot, tying my langot on YouTube, you get 50 different, it's some really, really interesting raps, how you do this. Most of the people on Devon Avenue don't even know what this is. I had to bring it back from India. Your culture, man. Anyway, just think of it as a triangular shaped piece of cloth that has 3 strings, 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom, and you just learn like a loincloth. You learn to wrap it around, tuck it in, and pull it up the back. Whoop! Pull it up the back, and it's a triangle, so it's almost like a little diaper. So that once you bring the strings, or you tuck the extra material over itself, and then you tie it in with the strings. So, I'm sorry. Langot, yeah, sometimes Langhot, or sometimes with or without the H. So you lose your langot. And it's a very freeing feeling to your base chakras. That's all I have to say. Once you, because you got to get used to like the thing pulling up, right? But once you kind of get, it's very free. You realize that, because remember, most yogis are done as close to naked as possible, with as little interference of. And again, I started off from Kundalini Yoga, which was all with long kurtas and baggy things and a turban, whatever. Each system has its own way of trying to define for you what's going to work. But if you look at a lot of the classical pictures of yogis, they're almost butt naked. Last week, didn't I talk about Alexander the Great going to meet the Dandaswami? He was a naked yogi. So there's much history about that. But it isn't just being naked for the sense of naked. It's being unencumbered by anything that gives you other sensation, right? Anyway, it really pulls the Mul Bandha up incredibly. Inversions are unbelievable. That's all I can say. But I don't walk around the house that way. My wife has enough with like my yoga tights that she calls diapers as it is, so this is not for prying eyes. Anyway, so, but that's, he's wearing the longo, right? And then it shows you the different tensions in the sitting posture, different ways of energy moving. And if you do this correctly, if you see the sitting posture on the left side, don't you have it? Show her. Yeah. That tension going over the front to the back and hitting that little dot right there like a T9 where the spine and the rib cage move together, right? That's where most of you, if you do it correctly, will feel very weak and feel like it's hard to sustain that particular lift up if you're doing all those energy movements simultaneously and correctly. Because to sustain it, to endure for, 5 minutes is one thing, but to do for 25 or 30 minutes while you're doing all the other bandhas, that's why your asana practice, posture is supposed to be a prerequisite before you do these other things, because it implies that by the time you're ready to get to this stage, you put in enough work to know your body, to open it up, to hold poses for longer periods of time. And now this is a new way of holding the poses for a longer period of time because you're not moving as much. At least when you're doing other yoga postures, the fact that you get a chance to shift and change whatever gives you a little break. No, not here. You're just babysitting with your mind. Anyway, Pratyahara, just a reminder, the idea behind all of this is to go deeper and deeper into withdrawing from the world, hopefully not in a kind of reclusive way, but the necessary time out, the me time, the private time, especially if you have a lot of responsibilities and you're the primary caregiver in your family or something like that, you're going to burn out unless you take time for yourself. Now, that's the surface level of get out of the social net. You don't have to be always available, doing things, producing. But another level, it's also following what yoga is trying to say. Remember, the goals of yoga are way behind just learning how to, way beyond learning how to relax. They're always telling you the senses are distracting you. The pull of the outer world, shut that down. Go inside and find out what other world exists there, because that's going to take you, from their point of view, towards what? Well, what we're all practicing to do this, to experiencing the self, yeah? So there's different kind of pratyahara techniques, but pranayama is like the shift from the more outer practice, which they call Baharanga sadhana, to the antaranga sadhana, to the more inner practice. But then even doing the inner practice is a way of sharpening your mind and making you psychologically insightful. That's not the atma anga. The whole purpose of yoga is not either the outer world or even the inner world of the mind, but to go to the next level, you experience what is this essence of ourself. They call it the self or Purusha, whatever you want, the word's irrelevant. It's the experience they want you to have. Can't do that unless you really kind of cut bait from all that other stuff out there. Whether it's, every single day when you meditate, or if you take the ultimate renunciation and you never come back. Then I want you to remind you, we've got to do Jalandhar Bandha. He's showing the technique with the roll underneath the neck. We'll do some variations to show you again how to make sure you don't awaken too much energy in your head. I don't want you to be a Kundalini casualty, as we say. And then some techniques from Yoga the Iyengar way, just on basic sitting for Ujjayi, Viloma, and Kumbhaka holding as a reminder, and then applying those particular techniques with the digital controls that we're going to do. So I don't have to give you more pages of that. That's the template, then use that now. How do I do that while I'm doing the digital control? And then, just to show you that I'm not against having things from other techniques, this is from the Himalayan Institute tradition, because it covers an aspect of the Yoga Sutras which is one of the things that we're also following, which is the rungs from 29 to 53. So you can read that. But again, this is the idea of following scriptural awareness. A lot of what we're doing is we're taking what tradition is said to do, and we're doing it. Study tradition. They have a lot of smart things to say, a lot of good things about what's contraindicated and what prevents you from doing it. And also you start aligning yourself with this other vibratory force that is powerful and that you can benefit from, but you got to invoke its presence in your life if you would evoke a response from it. Simply said, you got to ask for help. Okay. Then the last thing was another thing that's from the Yoga Sutras again that has to do with Chitta Prasadnam, the four states of Brahma. As we're going about this, because again, if your left brain is the only one that's understanding this, this seems to be a process in time. So as we're going about this, they're giving you another tip about how to comport yourself while this is going on and while you're realizing you're in the neophyte stage or the continuing stage, or if you study the scriptures really clearly, as Maharishi Mahesh Yogi used to say, cosmic consciousness is the beginning of the path, not the end of the path. And how do you understand that? Because once they teach you, once they explain to you what samadhi is, which in the Yoga Sutras you use the word samyama, which is the fusion of the last three stages of Ashtanga Yoga, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Once you do that, that's not the end. Then you use that particular power of mind, because now you can, so to speak, whip it out any time, at will, and then you take that laser-like focus and you put it on, and they give you all the different concentration objects, they say. And if you get to chapter 3, the vibhuti powers, occult powers, they say, accrue to this. That's beyond my scope. Right? But the idea is that you take the fused power of mind, and then you have these different stages of deepening the samadhis. While you're on the way to doing this, they say, this is how to comport yourself in the world. Chitta Prasadnam, the four abodes of Brahma. So, Chitta Prasadnam, right? You know, basic friendliness to everybody, compassion for everybody, joy with anybody who experiences a moment of goodness, no jealousy whatsoever for anybody having a good time, you know, and getting a better slice than you. Fine with me. I'm so happy to see other people in love or smiling. Great. Not like, you know, what are you so happy about? Great. And then indifference, this is one of the toughest ones, indifference to evil. How do you deal with the, you know, malevolence of humanity and the appearance of evil? And I don't know if I said it last week, but it's such a good one, I like to say it all the time. And when I ask my rabbi, is evil stronger than good? He says, no, but not by much. And then he says, the power of malevolence and evil is stronger than naive optimism. But it's not stronger than optimism without naivete. And, you know, you got to get that. And if you get that, you are a bearer of the light. And you have to keep that up in the face of darkness. And when other people try to shut that down, that's just how it is. So you have to learn the difference between optimism and naive optimisms. And, you know, most of the gurus or people who I've studied with are very positive people. Right? But are they naive about what's going on in the world? I don't think so. I don't think so. So you're not buying, you know, a bill of goods. This is not pie in the sky. You have to have critical intellect. There's no viveka if you don't do that. But make sure you discriminate and articulate the difference between naive optimism and optimism without naivete. Then the last thing is blanket folding. It's good to have a little chart to remember at home if you don't have bolsters, what you can do for these different kinds of tubular folds and so forth. And then I threw in a poem, because I always like to throw in poetry, because poets say it really good. In fact, you can think that all the scriptures are nothing but poetry in a different form, especially when before it was written down, it was oral transmission. So did I talk about this? Did I mention this poem last week? The core of masculinity? No? All right. The core of masculinity does not derive from being male, nor friendliness from those who console. Your old grandmother says, maybe you shouldn't go to school. You look a little pale. Run when you hear that. A father's stern slaps are better. Your bodily soul wants comforting. The severe father wants spiritual clarity. He scolds, but eventually leads you into the open. Pray for a tough instructor to hear and act and stay within you. We've been busy accumulating solace. Make us afraid of how we were. Make us afraid of how we were. All right. So that's my idea. That's what the manual is all about. And every week, to some extent, I'm going to give some variations on all of that. All right? All right. That having been said.
I'm not familiar with the word banda. What is that?
Banda. Banda literally means banda. Literally means lock. Right. So it has to do with one of the yoga concepts. Remember I talked about everything is hyperlinked to something else? Right. So one of their ideas is like pushing energy from the bottom of a toothpaste up through the top. The idea of this raising of the kundalini, or the dormant potential of your own nervous system, which is the energy of consciousness itself. From their point of view, it's blocked from moving up the spine to the head, where it would give it a kind of charge or animation. And so there are different, they call them knots, granthis of tension in the pelvis, in the stomach, and in the throat that don't allow this to happen. So as you open up the channels to allow this to happen, you don't want the channels to flood you with it, so you're kind of like drowned in it. You have to somehow control it, like having a dike or a dam, and then you can regulate the flow. So these different bandhas or locks, like you ever go in Chicago and they have like the water, but before you have to stop and they have to drop. So different locks. So the lock that you pull at the base of your spine, called Mula Bandha, helps to integrate everything and pull it up to the stomach. And then there's a lock that you do in your stomach, pulls it up to the head. But then to prevent the head from exploding, there's a lock in the neck. So basically the bandhas are available to do that, and sometimes they do separate exercises for each one, and then ultimately the idea is to do what's called Mahabandha, where you're doing all three at the same time for advanced practitioners. Kids, don't try it at home. No, you should try it at home. You have to find out. But usually most people are too scared to try it without supervision, so they don't. They just read about it. All right, so that's what's going on. So I'm going to shut this down just 1 second because I'm not getting the thing there I want. I guess I could just ask you, why didn't that come out? There we go. Come on, help me. That's what. All right, here we go. So get ready, friends. It's time to blow your mind. Come to your senses. Be alert. Get rid of the thinking mind. I know it's a lot of information, but remember the way I'm putting it out there, who knows who's going to connect to what. So just enjoy it. This is called, is this mic is working, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. This is called, do me a favor, would you open this for me? This is called beginner's mind. Beginner's mind. Yeah. Anybody know who this guy is? Thank you. No Zen students here? Thank you. Suzuki Roshi. Yeah. The guy who started the Tassajara, Green Gulch, all his students from, thank you, San Francisco and stuff like that. Okay. Love this guy. He has a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's a classic, but it's really hard to understand if you're trying to get into it with your left brain. Not that they repudiate rational thinking or anything, but if you're stuck in rational thinking, you just never get to that. Like this says, trying to understand the astrolabe of love from the left brain. It just doesn't work that way. So one of the first things he says in his book, first chapter, in the beginner's mind, there's many possibilities. In the master's mind, there's few. So this is a little insight to how to get your head into what Zen thinking is so you can stay in beginner's mind. Most of us don't want to stay in beginner's mind. We only practice yoga because we're hoping to advance. So your whole life is based on the more, the further, progress, improvement, next level, better, more, sooner, and so forth like that. Okay. Because once you have some experience, you're not a beginner anymore, right? And now starts slowly creeping in the arrogance that comes with thinking you know, when of course you still don't know. And this is classic. It happens to everybody. Otherwise the masters wouldn't point this out as an ongoing thing that you go through. So when you say, sure, master's mind, in the beginner's mind there's many possibilities, in the master's mind there's few, I totally understand it, because the beginner doesn't know shit from Shinola. Could be this, could be that. They have no idea. But the master, they've done everything, A to Z, soup to nuts. No questions in their mind. It's this, it's not that. That's exactly the wrong way to understand the teaching. Beginner's mind is the hardest thing to hold on to, because once you think you know something, you don't think you're a beginner anymore. And to continue to humble yourself and come back to the place where you say, I know nothing, or I know next to nothing. And you do know something, but I can tell you, my experiences of being in India with the senior teachers, right, and he'll just like rake them through the coals and just right in front of everybody else. How many years have you been practicing? 25 years. 25 years you're practicing, your Tadasana looks like that? And they take the hit because they realize, just because you have 25 years of practice and everybody else in the country, because you tour nationally, sees what you do and thinks it's great, but in front of the master, you take a humble stance and realize, I don't know a lot, sir. Yeah, in the master's mind, that's the wrong place to be. How can you keep bringing yourself back to beginner's mind? Start again. Now, again, it's almost impossible to do this only in yoga, so I always suggest to people, take on another discipline that you don't do at all. Because in all of the traditional cultures, if you lived in India, you're smart, you probably study tabla, or like take an Ayurveda course, or learn how to cook with curry. Or if you were in Japan, you'd do calligraphy, or flower arranging, or tea ceremony, or something. It's a kind of assumption that you're going to continue to grow in your life by challenging yourself by doing something which does not come easy. But you love somehow what it brings into your life, so I'm going to apprentice myself to this and feel like I'm a beginner in this. That's the state of mind that you have to try to bring to your yoga practice. Or as my teacher says, every lesson has to be fresh and virginal, whether you're a teacher or a student. That's the challenge. So everything is about beginner's mind. Now the Yoga Sutras, I've told you, right, there's the 4 faces of Brahma. You want to be in the godlike state, then learn to put on that friendly disposition to everybody, feel for everybody's pain. If you don't have immediate suffering right in front of you, bring out the joy. Everybody got a place that's dying to strut your stuff, right? If you got it, flaunt it, right? JC says you don't have a light and put it under a stand where no one can see. You lay it out on top of where everybody can see it, right? And then the indifference to evil. You have to understand what karma is all about. Unless you specifically feel that your svadharma and path to unfolding is cutting-edge social activism, then you can do that. But historically, yogis are apolitical because their focus is on a transcendent cosmology that isn't in time to begin with. So, especially as you get toward the end stages of life, you're just not messing around at all with what human beings are doing. You move to another place. But that's the yoga thing. I don't say that's proper for us, but that's the yoga ideal. But nonetheless, hang out in those stages as much as you can, right? Be friendly to as many people as long as it's up to you, right? Have compassion for people suffering. Bring as much joy as you can when you don't have to face the situational suffering in front of you, and then understand how to be indifferent to evil, right? Because what you resist persists unless you're specifically called to do frontline action, in which case understand karma and let the people who make negative choices have that karma come back to them in the unintended consequences that they did not realize would accrue as a result of acting that way. Now, yoga posits this idea of finding your center, right? You want to be a beginner? Find your center. Every day your center is thrown off by something, and you have to find your way back to the center. It's like a labyrinth. It's all designed to get you back to the center. It's not a maze to keep you trapped in it where you can't find your way. It's designed to get you to that point, and the center is where the origins are. And this is another example, many examples of how do you find the tree of life, the cosmic axis, the sluice gate from which the worlds that are celestial feed the worlds that are terrestrial, right? The world navel, call it whatever you want. It's the axis mundi, and the spine in yoga, Merudanda, that is the place that it happens. You are a microcosmic reflection of energies going on all over the cosmos, as far as the yogis say. So, what's your center? Well, sitting in meditation is supposed to be it for a yogi. Because the Buddha reminds you, he's the example of sitting still a long time till you break a breakthrough, right? How fierce was his discipline? I don't want to go over the story of the Buddha tonight in case you don't know it, but it's classic. But the basic idea is, when he got his moment right before he said, I'm ready to do this, he said, may my bones turn to dust. He took the Mahavrata, the great vow. May my bones turn to dust if I move from this spot before I become enlightened. It's called the immovable spot. Now, fortunately for him, he got enlightened the next morning, But he probably did all this other work prior to that. But he took the Mahavrata at that moment, and okay, so you sit there until you get there. Right? And like I said, the thing I like the most about Buddha's life is, number one, he was a master of putting the reptilian brain on a leash. It's one of my favorite one-liners, right? He was a master of putting the reptilian brain on a leash. So you have to control the brain stem and all the instinctive functions, no doubt. But he also wants you to control the cerebellum and the emotional functions. Because if you can't do that, and the instinctive energies and your emotional energies, which are very territorial, we have a lot of territoriality in us, millions of years old, so people don't want to give up their space. You know what I'm talking about, right? Nobody wants to give up their space. Nobody knows how to negotiate. It's not just in our country, all over the world. This is a human thing. Remember, he's Indian, he's not white. He's not from a white Caucasian culture. But you even got to control the cerebral cortex, because thought is not who you are either. You got to shut thought up. And that's what meditation is all about. And the other thing is that he stayed around, according to their historical records, 40 years after his enlightenment. So he was able to give teachings that were not only for the basic beginners and for the monks and nuns, but for the lay public. And then you could say he got the tantric teachings in, which is what the Tibetan tradition turned out to be, right? For the people who are on the path a really long time and are like in the samadhi states, they call it the jhanic states, and could go into these deep states of concentration. Well, he had teachings for those people, because think about if Jesus was around for 40 years after, he hit we'd have a lot of other teachings, and look at how much they milked that from only 3 years. Well, the Buddhist, the amount of sutras that they have reputed to be from the Buddha, and the commentaries on that, pretty extensive. So, or as I like to say, the Dharma doesn't suffer in comparison to any teaching. So if you can learn what the Buddha had to share, it's a pretty good base from which you can start riffing. All right, now, when are you going to show some initiative, Findlay? Well, when you tell me to, sir. Everyone, get ready to repeat. You're like my college class. When you're not proactive, by default, you go to chaos. Everyone. When you're not proactive, by default, you go to chaos. Yeah. You carry yourself very differently when you're proactive, and the world looks very different to you. And you carry yourself very differently when you're not proactive, and the world looks very different to you. So if there's any party that complains about anything and said, well, somebody ought to do something about that. Okay. Who is that somebody? You. Yeah. So, then you have to distinguish, if you're going to be proactive, you have to distinguish between these two things. Do I follow authority? While the schools embrace the principles of autonomy and independence, you will, of course, continue to obey my every command. So that's the danger of being a and a follower. And don't think you're not. If the first thought that comes up is you're not a follower, you're probably a bigger follower than the people who know they're following. Okay? To this, self-responsibility. You made the mess, you clean it up. Or follow authority. Let them tell you what the mess is to clean up. Don't do that. I'm marinated in my technique, and yet at the same time I'm telling you, do not buy anybody's spiritual con job. Whatever they're trying to sell, right? Every buyer needs a seller. So what are you trying to buy? From who? The techniques are supposed to make you what the guru's consciousness is, not follow what the guru did. At least that's what I've learned. Actually, I just woke up one day and decided I didn't want to feel like that anymore, or ever again. So I changed. Just like that. It's called the sudden school. You can be in the gradual school if you want to, and say, doesn't the water have to heat up until it gets to like 211.99, and then when it goes to 212, then it starts boiling, right? That's called the gradual school. Can't argue that person out. But the sudden school will say, but what happens from the moment it goes to 2011.99 to 211 degrees, 0.99 to 212 degrees? That's the sudden school. You get it or you don't get it? Otherwise, you'll be pursuing these things that authorities have told you to pursue. Now, if you get this, you got to create your own motivational slogans, your own inspirational quote of the day. And it ought to come from what you say to yourself, not reading Louise Hay's book, however nice that is, or whatever book I will one day put out in my affirmation. People always ask me about my affirmations, because right now it's public knowledge. My affirmations are public knowledge. But I have 365 of them. So I have to wait until I retire, where I will take it and it'll be one of those things on your bedstand every day, a new mantra. Then you won't be getting it free. So right now, I'm telling you, I'm looking at the camera. Go to the Yoga Circle archive, yogacircle.com. Under my name, pull it down. Affirmations, the archive. It's free right now. And I didn't try to make money on this while I was making all the money to put the girls through college. But I need multiple streams of income once I retire. So you're going to pay then, so get it free now. But if you understand what this is about self-responsibility, because you found the thing, you've taken your own shit, and you're trying to do something with that, instead of telling other people, reforming other people what to do with their shit. You get it like that. That's it. And when you do that, you have now become a devotee. You begin to devote your whole life to something greater than yourself, whatever that is. You offer the love you hold in your heart to that, whatever that is. And if you're a yogi, you do arti, you do light puja to the guru, whoever brings light into your life. Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana 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 Om Narayana Narayana Om Satya Narayana Narayana Om Om Satse Guru Deva. And you chant that a few times with all the devotees taking the light into you as they're bringing it around. And you realize, I'm aiming higher. I can't explain it to anybody. Maybe I can't make my mother like what I'm doing or anybody or my spouse, but it doesn't matter. I got it. I offer it to you. Krishna says, those who worship the gods, go to the gods. Those who worship me, go to me, capital M-E. It doesn't mean Krishna, I don't think. Because Krishna would be one of the gods you go to. So, but this is Krishna talking as a mouthpiece for the transcendent, invisible, formless spirit. That's what you dedicate yourself to. And then if it has a form, great. So in our path, you learn the principles of alignment. I'm aligning myself with this. And Hatha Yoga is the grounding discipline to all this stuff that seems like that's a frou-frou in the heart stuff like this. Yeah, fine. But for me, now I get it. All right, I'm aligned. He says God is the median plane. I'm going to find out where that center is right there and see if I can experience vector force equilibrium, which is a scientific way of saying that's what enlightenment is. Just at the anatomical level. God. And I'm glad he's not asking me to criticize his posture as he once did. Okay, so this is attention, intention, attitude, effort, and surrender. And seriousness in terms of not grim, because it's serious play. Right? But you take it seriously. Because you go to India and they ask us, what practices are you doing? I'm not doing any practice. Nobody takes you seriously. And I'm all for understanding your life is your practice. I understand that. But that's not abdication of a specific practice. Right? So that's like we say in the men's work. People try to get out of responsibility. You say, no, that's expected. Now what else? Oh, it's expected that you're doing a practice. That's just for openers. Oh yeah, of course. And your life is your practice as well. But what's your practice? Okay. And you got to do the practice. It's called tapas in yoga. No one ever drowned in sweat. Lou Holtz, former Notre Dame, right? You got to put out effort in yoga. You have to have energy. It's called virya, stamina, strength, vigor. And continue to do it. To be established in this, it has to be over a prolonged period of time, they say. With dedication, as an offering, not just as an end, as a love offering, right? And when you do that, you sharpen your edge. By exploring and concentrating, you get both clarity, you get calm, you get radiance, right? Tejas, you get the glow. And it leaves its impression in the environment that you do it in. I'm happy to say that most people who walk into my yoga studio feel there's a vibe there. They haven't even taken breath. They walk in already, something is going on here. I can't put my finger on it, but it feels pretty good.
She says
it's the chocolate. It's the chocolate. Even before I used to give chocolate after the class, we're next to Blommer's factory, so it could be like, But they only wafted a few times a day. So. But when you sharpen the edge, there's a certain readiness, alertness about you, because this is part of the transformation that's happening. And yoga is telling you, you're going to transform yourself out of just the waking consciousness into the liminal states where the dream images of the subconscious impressions called the samskaras come in. And then deeper than that are these latent impressions, which can only come in when you're in that state that is beyond what you normally think of as your waking consciousness or even your dream consciousness. There's another state. How do we know? Because we've mapped it with brain waves. So it isn't waking and it isn't dreaming. And yet here it is. And that ain't it either, because there's a fourth brainwave. The yogis call it Turiya, the state that's beyond. We have no way of describing what it is, because the first three ways that we've described doesn't cover it. So what could it be? A physicist called David Bohm calls it the implicate order. It's as if consciousness wraps itself within itself like in a cocoon, and temporarily is in a state of like suspended animation. Like it goes back to kind of latent or embryonic form. Everything is implied or implicit, but nothing is expressed or explicit. And then when it manifests in form, it comes down through the planes and through some kind of coagulation. It appears not as light, but as something that appears solid, but from another point of view, it's not. So everything we're doing, once we sharpen the edges, is to experience this Turiya form, which is another word for the self. And if you do that, this is all beginner's mind, something will happen. Your mind will get free from clutter, even if you don't have a feng shui practice or like you're not a Zen. Your mind will get free from clutter. Things will become very, very clear, and you realize in a few images here, I need a space. I'd like to have it clean or ordered. I need a practice mat. I need a couple of reference books. I need an image in front of me to remind me of what is the goal I'm aspiring to, and I want to have light. I want light to come in. I want to be enlightened by the light. So to take that all to the same place, my friends, first of all, don't forget, surrender. It says in the Gita, in any way that people love me, M-E, capital, right? In that way they find me. In the end, all come to me. Whether it's an articulated form or not. Surrender. Don't keep putting, just bow down, humble yourself, get into the contrite heart, realize how flawed one may be, and other people's flaws and the nightmare of history, and just give it up. And if you do that, the hardest part of coming back to the beginning is the integration of all of this off of the mat. And to be a beginner every time you meet other people and realize, well, the old way of working doesn't work with them. And I don't change anybody from being pissed off at them. So I got to come up with some creative, different thing. Just like I learned to create new postures, innovate the postures, create the postures. I'm going to do something different every time I meet other people. I don't have to premeditate what it's going to be. Spontaneity is going to come out of me. Because the integration of whatever you do when you're by yourself and doing the practice is tested. The rubber meets the road here. Do I bring that into my dealings with humanity? Because to be means to be regulated. So, quickly, in reverse. Integration is off the mat. Whatever way you love spirit, that's the way you find spirit. Get an uncluttered mind and space for yourself to do this, and see whether or not you can experience that other dimension of possibility of human potential. But it's not going to be done unless you practice and sharpen your edge, and you're not going to sharpen your edge unless you put in the time. And you're putting in the time because you're already aligned with certain principles that you're willing to devote yourself to, because you just woke up one day and realized, like that, I get it. And you're living a life of self-responsibility, you're taking care of your own stuff instead of reforming other people, and not following authority who tries to tell you what to do instead of you being the authority in your own life. And you're not waiting for somebody else to do this, you're taking initiative. And the initiative is all about, can I quiet myself enough to experience what's really going on at the deepest level that any human being could potentially experience. And if I can do that, I will find what the center is. I will be an embodiment at a microcosmic level of what is potentially available to everybody at a macrocosmic level. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to maintain the awareness of how to keep my mind in that abode of Brahma, the realm of where the gods hang out, by being friendly, compassionate, joyful, and indifferent to evil. And all of that serves me to stay in beginner's mind where there are many possibilities and not just few. All right, that's the blah, blah, blah.